And so I said what I said, Sammy. Like I'm not going back on that. I know reading a couple of the comments, people are like, well, if we had the haul for Justin Fields, the discussion, they're like, well, the discussion isn't who's a better quarterback. Well, we would have had more players. And maybe I didn't go through it and really kind of go over what the haul would have entailed. Now, the haul for last season would have meant we would have had we still would have had 2 first-round picks. So instead of Kalen, let's say we had Jackson Powers Johnson, which okay, that might help. We might have gotten an extra second-round pick, which Ryan Poles probably would have traded away. And then a lot of what we would be getting as reinforcements to help the Bears would be next year. It would be 2 first-round picks next year in 2025. It would be 2 first-round picks in 2026, unless it was a team that gave us a player. Trying to think of who we would have traded. Like, there's not anybody, unless the Giants had given us Dexter Lawrence or something like that. I don't even know. I don't even want to speculate. But to act like we would have been so flush with talent over the course of this season, if we had done the haul, like, no, we would have had Justin and like 1 or 2 extra players, which I don't think would have made much of a difference. When we have this coaching staff, when we have the problems that we have, none of that would have made a difference. Like, it was destined. And I should have been smart enough to see it. I didn't. I let my blue and orange colored glasses, which, by the way, are the colors of Cal State Fullerton. So I wear those on my Titan basketball contest or games as well. It doesn't matter. But I want to get Greg's opinion on this. So, Sammy, let's start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
Brought to you by Circa Sports Illinois, the sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Wednesday night. You know what that means? It is time for Take It to the Rank. A short week for the Chicago Bears. Just a mere few hours ago, I was out here doing my Monday night recap, and already it's time to look ahead to the Detroit Lions. I do want to look back a little bit for the Minnesota Vikings, but I do actually want to talk about the fact that people are taking what I deem to be unnecessary victory laps. So here to talk about it is my good friend and former bricklayer, Greg Braggs, who joins us here as he always does on Wednesday evenings. And I'm not going to ignore what's going on in the world, but I do know that you're doing well. You're hanging in as well as you can. But I would like to take this opportunity to focus on the Bears and a team that we love and support, and love and support to all your friends and family as well. But Greg, you okay? You doing okay?
Yeah, doing good, man. I appreciate you checking up and checking in. And yeah, it's I think you'd probably know better than I do, at least in this industry's sake, that tomorrow isn't promised to anyone. So, I got to keep plugging away at what I'm trying to do and my goals and things I need to do for my family. But obviously, we have to always, be cognizant of the fact that, hey, you know what, tomorrow's your whole life might change. So appreciate today while you got it.
Yeah, I mean, so many times you sit there. We had Michael Silver on a couple of weeks ago, and just talking with him, and just being in this business long enough, it eventually comes for us all. It is one of those inevitabilities, and unfortunate that it's happening, and the timing and all that stuff. But again, don't want to dive deep too much into that. I do want to talk about the Chicago Bears because Monday night, absolutely atrocious. I want to ask you, though, when we start off here today, because I kind of went after the people and who I like. Like, listen, I don't dislike these people. I just ordered 2 Justin Field jerseys for my kids because I still love the man. And I get a 30% off to NFL Shop, and the jerseys are already down to like $20 anyway. So, like, why wouldn't I? My kid's been running around in Jay Cutler jerseys for years. So I've upgraded them to Justin Field jerseys. Do you feel like the people who are now like, oh, I'm taking a victory lap? Do you think that's a little premature, or do you think it's the right posture for people to be taking right now?
I mean, I think people can take whatever victory laps they think are necessary, but I think a lot of victory laps are based off of hypothetical scenarios that can't be proven whether or not they would have worked out or not, right?
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, the Bears messed up because this would have been the better path, but you can't necessarily prove that. And so that's fine if that's how you feel. I don't think, especially for speaking for me and you, as excited as we were going into this season, I'll say it for myself. They have not met the expectations that I had for them. And that's beside the fact that I didn't think they should run it back with the coaching staff.
Yeah.
With the coaching staff that they brought back, I still felt like that their threshold of wins would be much higher than where we're at now and where this could end the year. It's not good enough, and that's why coaches ultimately were fired in the middle of the season, and typically that's not something the Bears organization does. Now, if you want to try to take a victory lap on should have kept Justin, should have taken the haul, and focused on the trenches and focused on all these holes that are so glaring now in an 8-game losing streak, you have the right to that opinion. But as I was talking with some friends the other day, it just kind of feels like a 6 in one, half a dozen in the other. And the most important position in all of sports, and certainly in the NFL, is the quarterback position. And when you have an opportunity to take someone you feel strongly about, it's a huge risk to pass on that, even if the timing isn't necessarily perfect and your roster isn't necessarily perfect or your coaching staff isn't necessarily perfect. So Bears had the number 1 pick. That coincided timing-wise to Justin Fields. That wasn't ideal, where he didn't get a 4th year to prove it. And so here we are. The Bears obviously need to address the trenches in a big way this offseason. So as I said before, 6 and 1, half a dozen in the area. You could have addressed the trenches last year and then maybe still had a quarterback question coming up this offseason, or now this offseason, you know who your quarterback is, and now you have the trenches to do, coming up. So it's just like, ultimately, I think we all agreed, whether you were on a Justin Fields side or you're on the Caleb Williams side of direction, that we all thought the coaching staff needed to be revamped, and the Bears found that out the hard way as we hit November. So, I mean, I think that's just kind of the easiest way to lay it out.
Yeah, if there's anybody who should be victory lapping, it was the Fire Eberflus contingent of the Bears fan base.
Which was mostly everybody, 98% of the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I mean, if you're asking me if you were going to go with Harbaugh or you wanted to go with Matt Eberflus, I would have taken Harbaugh 100 times out of 100. Right. And I think most people would have felt that way too. And I know that the Chargers have started to lose. I think what we're starting to see with the LA Chargers is that they actually have a roster that was not sustainable for what they were able to do. And they're actually a little bit of a ways away from where they will need to be in order to be a truly competitive team in the AFC. And it's just starting to now fall apart as injuries mount. But the one thing that really bothers me, though, and this goes back to, again, with the take the hall people, is number one, I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr., who everybody was projecting, I don't think that he's put up the year that a lot of people expected him to have. Right. I don't think you could look at that like, oh my God, I can't believe that we let that guy go. There's been nothing. Brock Bowers is the closest of well, maybe we should have taken Brock Bowers. But again, I'm not sure how much of a difference that would have made with us running 12 personnel or anything. And he's in the slot now, but whatever. Because they still would have gone to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and done a lot of that stuff. So that part of it is true. But the people who are like, well, this just shows how far away, we were never going to be competitive this season. That's where I have to be. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you right there, because we were 4-2. And had there been a little bit of presence of mind by some coach or some accountability in the defensive secondary, people are like, let's knock down this pass before we start talking S and running our mouths. That team would have been 5-2. And I'm not saying that they would have defeated the Arizona Cardinals, but I definitely believe they would have defeated the New England Patriots. And then you look at how close they were over a 3-week stretch of beating the Pack, potentially beating the Vikings, potentially beating the Packers, potentially beating the Lions. And to sit here and be like, see, they were never going to win. No. You cannot do that. I think this team was there. The coaching malpractice is what cost them. It's nothing. The Hall wouldn't have changed that. The Hall wouldn't have changed the coaching. They still would have lost. the biggest issue for the Bears was keeping Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can sit there and pick nits on that, but as people said going into the season, this is the best situation a rookie quarterback has ever walked into, and now
good.
the I told you so too, or the victory lappers are using that as, see, look how stupid you look. I'll still stand by it. This roster is good enough to win right now. Does that mean that they are absent of flaws? 100%. No, they have flaws on this roster. Most NFL rosters do. But I thought this roster, and still think this roster, is good enough to win. And with a better coaching staff, I think most could come around to the idea that they should have more wins than they currently do. I was a big Harbaugh advocate. I believe if some on the field side of things want to play the hypothetical, see if they had taken the Hall, they'd be better because of this X, Y, and Z. Well, I can do the same thing with the hypothetical tour with having Jim Harbaugh as the head coach. Ultimately, we'll never know those answers, and so it's it's a silly exercise, but there's nothing Bears fans love to argue more about than the hypotheticals. And so that's fine. We can all have those opinions. I see people in the chat saying, well, we could have drafted Olu Fashanu at 9. I agree with that. You want to be critical of, Ryan Poles and not address now they have to address the trenches this upcoming offseason. Well, they could have drafted a tackle at 9. They could have drafted one of the 14 solid centers that were available in this year's draft. But then you have to ask yourself, would those guys have been NFL ready enough right now to change the trajectory of ultimately what happened with this team? Because they're still rookies, right? They'd still have development to do. They still would have had to deal with Shane Waldron not having 15 scripted plays to start the year or using his personnel in the appropriate manner. So, it's just, I think it's a pointless exercise, and everything kind of happens for a reason. And so now we're here. And I think now going forward, there's an opportunity for this team to bolster a roster that I do think has talent on it. And with, enough coaches available here that I think are some that are intriguing, that could work out. It's not like a one or done situation as far as some of the coaches that we're looking at to potentially be the head coach of the Bears in 2025. I think there's a lot of intriguing options at their disposal, luckily.
No, 100%. And it's funny because I pointed this out yesterday too, for everybody who's like, this is like a 5-year rebuild. I'm like, okay, do you guys not remember how dreadful the Commanders were in 2023? Like, that was a terrible team. There was a reason why they picked 2nd overall. Okay. It wasn't because the Bears got the number 1 overall pick because it was Carolina. It wasn't the Bears who earned that number 1 spot in that season. It was the Carolina Panthers. The Commanders were dreadful. And then all of a sudden you change the coach and bring in a competent offensive coordinator. And I'm using this to kind of prove the Mike Vrabel would be a better option type of thing. But still, a coaching change does matter. And especially if you nail it, if you do get the right one with a lot of people might have considered an uninspiring hire because Dan Quinn had been okay in Dallas, but that Cowboys team got murdered by the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs to the point of like, do you really want to take Dan Quinn at this point? And I might even stand by the fact, like, next season when they go and everybody's picking the Commanders to like go to the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl or any sort of nonsense like this. Remember the Cleveland Browns this season. Like, the Cleveland Browns in 2023 got away with a lot of stuff, won a lot of games they probably shouldn't have won, which is what Washington's doing right now, including the game against the Bears. Last week, was it last week? 2 weeks ago, there was the Saints game. They should have lost to the Saints, like that. But still, that's how small and razor thin the margin is in the NFL. So don't sit there. That's another thing that's driving me crazy. Is people would be like, this team's 20 years away. Like, it's not 20 years away. Another thing I do want to ask though, because this is the one too that kills me, is when people are like, well, I didn't expect them to win with a rookie quarterback. And I'm like, okay, when you say that, are you implying that Caleb Williams has been the problem this year? Because if anything, Caleb Williams is the only thing that keeps me from jumping off the Sears Tower.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Caleb Williams, if you say, oh, well, I didn't expect him to win anyway because they have a rookie quarterback, well, then you don't think that Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron should have been fired.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
Then keep those guys because there was no expectations to this season. Like, I don't want to hear any complaining about where the team is at right now. If you were one of the people in the season saying, wins don't matter. All that matters is Caleb's development.
Yeah.
If that's all that matters, then just look at Caleb's development. Is it good enough for you? I think for most people, they would say it's not. So I'm glad to see we have high expectations in this city, as we should when you draft a quarterback number 1 overall at the pedigree that Caleb Williams has. I think most sensible people would say he's on a fairly solid trajectory with everything you consider that he's had to go through here this year. But that doesn't mean he's void of criticism either. I mean, this game in Minnesota might have been one of his worst of the season. So that's not the right, trajectory you want for him right now, is, missing guys over the middle. As I was talking with Brian Baldinger earlier today, and he was saying, reading the rush and not reading the field. And that happens to rookie quarterbacks when, defensive coordinators are throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you. And then you look at Bo Nix and you look at Jaden Daniels and how cool, calm, and collected those offenses and those teams look right now, and how those quarterbacks are able to develop within that system. So I think there has to be some consideration and acknowledgement for Caleb Williams within that development. So I think it's not ideal. I'm not going to sell anybody right now watching the show saying, "Oh, everything's fine, it's perfect." No, they have work to do now. And they have to get a coach that's going to get this right. But I'm also not sky is falling, we're doomed. I think there's a lot of things that need to change in House Hall, and we've talked about that here on this program. I've talked about it a lot on CHGO Bears, and so I definitely acknowledge some of the big changes that need to be made, but I also think that there is a pathway to success starting here in the offseason and going into next season. But, that's why this is so terrifying, because they got to get this right, and that's not it's not a guarantee, but we're certainly hopeful and we're rooting for it.
I know that you said as well that you're going into next year, you're not going to be positive. You're not going to be like, "Hey, look at this. We've got this going." And you're not going to go to training camp and be like, "Oh my God, this guy made a great play. We're going to win the Super Bowl." That wasn't you. That was me. How are you going to approach this offseason? It's
going to be my most challenging task.
Because you won't be able to, I'm telling you right now, you won't be able to do it. You won't, because they're going to hire a coach that you're going to love.
I know. Be like, I'm going to do because I said this going into last year. Yeah. Going into this season, I said that I wasn't going to freak out before the season started, and I was going to keep my expectations at a reasonable. And then every year it just builds from free agency to the draft, and then when we get to training camp, it just goes up and up and up and up, and then right when you get to week 1, I'm at like peak full meatball. Yeah. But Kyle Long put it out there, and he said, "Don't tell me, show me." And I think it's a great slogan that the Chicago Bears and Bears Nation, we all need to have, because we're all making mistakes here. And I'm a part of the problem.
I'm probably the biggest part of the problem.
You're the biggest part of the – no, I'm kidding. And so we all have to take accountability. What can we do to be better about this? How can we change the mistakes of the past? And it starts with us saying, let's see it. Let's see it first. It doesn't mean you can't be optimistic, but it means that we're not going to oversell the hype too early, and we're going to press this team and challenge them to show us before we get ahead of our skis. And I think that's a fair way to approach it. I don't know how I'll do, but I want everyone to keep me in check and try to contain this meatball that's inside of me that just rolls out and becomes this just completely bludgeons everyone in its path. And then I find myself in November being absolutely crushed. So I need your help, Bears Nation. Contain the meatball.
Contain the meatball. Don't try to contain me, because I'm going to be betting on the Bears once again. And speaking of which, the world's largest sports book in Las Vegas is right at your fingertips in Illinois. The Circus Sports app is sports betting the way it should be. Bet anywhere in Illinois and experience high betting limits, better moneyline splits, more in-game betting, and the best customer service. Download your new bookie today. Visit circusports.com and start betting like a pro from anywhere in Illinois. And if you or someone you know has a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text IL GAMB to 833-234. Now, our favorite anonymous source, our favorite burner account, Sears Tower, put out a lengthy post, tweet, X, whatever he was Xing yesterday, talking about the Bears, the fate of Ryan Poles. If I read this correctly, he said that Ryan Poles is safe unless he's fired. I think that's what it boiled down to. It's like, hey, he's safe. Well, unless he gets fired, then he's not as safe. Like, yeah, okay, thanks, Sears Tower. We all could have deduced that. What are we making of this? I take this to mean is that they want to hire Ben Johnson, and if Ben Johnson says it's cool, Ryan Poles can keep his job.
Yeah, I mean, definitely always paying attention to what Mr. Tower is saying, but yeah, it felt like a very obvious statement of, hey, this is what I think, but this could be what changes it. And so I don't know. I mean, if I was a betting man myself, I would say Ryan Poles is more likely to have the job in 2025 than not. So it's going to be interesting to see how this breaks down, but I that's where I'm leaning at this point. But I mean, all bets are off with Kevin Warren, and how he's running this. And, I've said from the start, like, if they see eye to eye on the direction, I could see them going hand in hand, going forward. But if they don't, is there a separation beyond what a potential head coach coming here would demand? But just, I think, between the two of them and their working relationship going forward. And so I think that's going to be the biggest key. I don't know, it's a really hard one to guess. And so I think my biggest concern with Ryan Poles isn't any of the personnel decisions. You can be upset that they didn't draft Olu Fashanu at 9. You can be upset if they didn't get a center. All these different things from a personnel standpoint. But my biggest concern with Ryan Poles, who I've been a big advocate for, is his decision-making with the coaching staff. And Matt Eberflus being your hire over a guy like Dan Quinn or Jim Caldwell, who were the finalists, the first time around. Then you keep Matt Eberflus last year. And then on top of that, identifying Luke Getsy and then Shane Waldron as your two play callers for two different quarterbacks that there was a lot of stakes riding on their success. And so how can I trust you to hire Ben Johnson and sell me that he is 100% unequivocally the right fit to run this offense and develop a quarterback? Because everybody wants to talk about Ben Johnson's plays and how great of a play caller he is, but he's got Jared Goff there, who is already a veteran quarterback. He's certainly having his best years in Detroit with Ben, but do we know that Ben Johnson can develop Caleb Williams? He can run an offense, but can he develop Caleb Williams on top of being the head coach for an entire team? And now I need to trust that Ryan Poles can identify that properly. Well, he just tried to sell us on Shane Waldron being that guy for Caleb Williams this year. And that, to me, is probably the biggest thing that I'm concerned about going into the offseason, which then it's like, oh, maybe they just need to be safe and get a guy like Mike Vrabel and have Josh McDaniels as his OC, because these are people we know what they do as coaches. Whether they're perfect or not is beside the point. It's about knowing what you're signing up for. And I think the more you consider guys that are an unknown, the harder it is for me to say, okay, I can buy into all this. And for Ryan Poles to have to sell all this to me with the resume of who he's hired behind him, it's a lot of things that you have to consider.
That's one of the things that always amuses me whenever they talk about how morose Ryan Poles looked during that press conference when Kevin Warren was talking and he was sitting there. Kevin Warren was like, yeah, and they were doing their thing. It's like Ryan Poles has he doesn't really have any leverage to be like, hey, like, listen, I'm the guy that brought in Eberflus. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm the guy that brought in yeah, that's a bad one too. Like where he starts going through his resume, like, yeah, maybe I'm not as hyper about that or anything like that. Like, yeah, you might need a little bit of adult supervision. It's kind of like when I'm allowing my daughter to make the spaghetti and she spilled it 3 times. Like this 4th time, I'm going to have to help you with the handle. This handle might be too hot for you. So I'm going to have to give you a little bit of an assistance And I think that's very fair. And if Ryan Poles is like, no, you have to trust me or get rid of me, I'd be like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do this one myself. I don't quite understand, though, because people just automatically hate Kevin Warren. I'm like, what did Kevin Warren do? Like, I don't know. Like, I understand that the situation with the stadium is not moving as swiftly as a lot of people would like to believe. And again, and I know that we've talked about it on this show. I believe it was this show. But I do believe, like I've talked about how long it took the Rams to get their stadium up and running. Like that took a long time.
Right.
From the time they bought the property. They're still in St. Louis, but they bought the property. You have to go through so many, not only legal hurdles, but like so many different financing things, and politicians have to be greased and things have to be going on. Like you all expected Kevin Warren to have a new stadium built by now, which is unrealistic. Even with buying the land, it is such an arduous process. Like it's never going to be easy. Like it's not like they were always saying that the stadium wasn't going to be around to the 2030s.
Especially with Chicago and all the red tape. I mean, every state has got red tape, but if you've ever followed Chicago politics, the tape string's pretty long.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. Even if you get out to the suburbs, there's still Cook County commissions and all sorts of things. So I don't understand why people just necessarily just immediately dismiss Kevin Warren like he doesn't know what he's doing or anything like that. It's always amusing to me because he's really done nothing in Chicago to me to where I'm like, yeah, I don't trust you either. Ryan Poles has, but
it's
like
clear
not
how much Kevin Warren is trying to get Arlington Heights and Chicago to have like a staring contest versus each other, and that's good business.
It's his job.
That's called trying to create leverage, right? And I ultimately think, they're getting closer with the tax approvals in Arlington Heights, and I think they're getting closer and closer to leaning towards staying in Arlington Heights. And I do think Kevin Warren's been genuine about his wish to stay in Chicago, but then I think there's a more realistic side that understands how much harder that will be to execute. So, I've said this before on this show and many times before on my own channels, but, there's something about the idea that Kevin Warren isn't a Chicago Bears lifer, and he's somebody that's come outside of this organization and trying to put his own fingerprints on things, whether it's the stadium or whether it's who works at Hallis Hall or how this roster and this coaching staff is built. I think it's worth a shot to have somebody with a fresh voice and a fresh idea and mindset of how to run a successful business, which he may not be a football guy, but from a business standpoint, he has been successful, which is why he's now the president of the Chicago Bears. So it's no guarantee that it'll work, but nothing the Bears have done for my entire life, which I'm almost 40 years old, has worked. So I would like to try to do things differently to see if that strategy works. Again, doesn't guarantee anything, but there's just something about the idea that Kevin Warren is shaking things up and providing a different perspective that at least says, okay, well, maybe he can be the change that we need here at Hallis Hall.
It's always amusing when people are like, they're upset with the family, the Hallis family or everything. Like they got it. They need a new voice. And then here comes Kevin Warren. They're like, we don't trust him. He's not a Bears guy. He's not a Chicago. I'm like, what is it? What do you want then? Because obviously you don't like the status quo. You don't like the newcomer. Like what would satisfy you? Does it have to be draft Dr. Phil himself, or who is it? Who is the person who can come in here and you would actually accept? I don't think that person exists unless Eddie Vedder wants to take over unless Eddie Vedder wants to come in and take over the Bears. And even then there'll be people like, I kind of like the Foo Fighters better, or Nirvana better. So it's not you're not going to satisfy anybody or everybody, I should say. And it's one of the things that's the most disappointing. I still believe, though, when I hear what Sears Tower was saying, because I feel Mike Vrabel might have the most there. I think there is a connection with Vrabel and Pace. I would have to go back because I know that the Chiefs and Patriots kind of intertwined because of my friend Scott Pioli. There is some synergy there, which kind of might mean that Vrabel would be the guy. But with the talk of like when Sears Tower is like, if the coach approves it, and the Lions have an assistant GM who would be the odds-on favorite to come over, Agnew, to come over with Ben Johnson. And again, I'm not advocating for Ben Johnson one way or the other. I think I've been pretty vocal about my support for Mike Vrabel and bringing some seriousness to this organization, maybe even a little cursing. So I'm interested. I'm curious to see how this goes on. And I like Ryan Poles. I really do. But I think we're starting to do more deep dives because it's like, and like some of the third round picks haven't worked out. We saw our tackle be put on skates on Monday Night Football.
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, for all that, I hope you enjoyed Monday Night Football and you enjoyed that beautiful stadium that the Minnesota Vikings play in, what many consider to be the very best stadium in the entirety of the NFL.
Right.
Oh, you know who put that together? Kevin Warren.
Yep.
So please get your stuff together.
I think the sad thing for Ryan Poles, at least from my standpoint, because I wanted him to succeed, and I'm a big Ryan Poles supporter, even through all the rocky roads that we've been through. But if they got rid of Ryan Poles, I wouldn't be able to argue against it. And
right.
I think that's probably
the
most damning part for him, is that I can't fight it if that's what they decide. I can be hopeful that I think that he can be a good GM going forward, but if they decide to go away from him, I wouldn't be able to argue against it because of the mistakes he's made. And then the other aspect of it, if they were to bring in another GM, Ryan Poles isn't the only GM in the NFL that can make a good football team. And the roster the Bears have is, for the most part, still going to be here next year. Yeah. And so I think the roster is good enough to win. I think there's plenty of people out there that can make this be a successful product next year. I'm hopeful that Ryan Poles is the guy that is that and makes the right decisions going forward. But I also don't think that, it's set in stone. And then I also don't think that he's the only guy that can get this done. There's a bunch of good coaches out there. Like everybody says, we have to have Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson isn't going to be the only coach to win a Super Bowl over the next 15 years.
You never know. He might be.
He might be, but it's more than likely not. So there's different ways to go about this and different pathways to still having success. So we just got to find that right combination for us.
Yeah, when it comes to Ryan Poles, I feel like the scene in The Godfather where Abe Vigoda looks at Robert Duvall and he's like, "Hey, can you get me off the hook here for old time's sake?" He's like, "Yeah, not this time. Sorry, pal." And that's the way it would be with Ryan Poles. If they would, I've been advocating for him for the last couple of years, allowing it to play out. Be like, "Hey, let King Poles cook." But if they came in and the Hallis family was asking me, I'd be like, "Well, I mean, like, you got to do what you got to do." Like, I understand the science behind it. I know that's always my cop out too. Like, I understand what people are thinking. I even understood. I didn't agree with it, but I understood what they were thinking about with Matt Eberflus. Like, I guess, like, whatever. Let's see what I mean. It was obviously horrifically terrible, and I think that's the one thing too. Is like if I remember the reporting, it being that Kevin Warren wanted Eberflus gone, but Ryan Poles is like, I stake my reputation on this guy, which is admirable. Find a friend like that if you can, but it might end up costing him his job. Speaking of people who might end up out of a job this season, which would be a little surprising, but the way the Browns season is starting to fall apart with everything that they've been going through, I believe it would be a mistake. But if Kevin Stefanski, now you've been along at, you love talking about Kyle Shanahan and all these other guys Sean McVay, who might or might not be fired. If Kevin Stefanski became available, what's your interest level in him?
I am all for having as many good options as we possibly can have for the Bears' next head coach. So Kevin Stefanski would only add to that list if he then became available. So yes, if the Browns want to get rid of Kevin Stefanski, be my guest. If the Rams want to trade Sean McVay, be my guest. If the 49ers want to trade Kyle Shanahan, be my guest. I even saw Chiefs fans complaining about Andy Reid's usage of Patrick Mahomes. If the Chiefs want to get rid of Andy Reid, be my guest. We have to have as many options at our disposal so we don't mess this up. And so we'd really appreciate other teams making mistakes and getting rid of good coaches. That would play right into our hands, because ultimately there's scenarios that you can draw up where Ben Johnson goes to the Cowboys, to the highest bidder, and Joe Brady goes to the Bengals because of his familiarity with Joe.
Wait, so that means Zach Taylor would be gone?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Zach Taylor becomes available. But then Mike Vrabel goes to Ohio State because Ryan Day gets fired. Like, there's scenarios where the coaches we're talking about go to other places and don't come to the Bears. So when you bring up Kevin Stefanski, sure, bring him on. I need as many options as we possibly can, so then when we get to this point, we can start lining it up and seeing which one's the right fit for us. But it's not a guarantee that we're going to have the first pick of the litter. And so that also is something I think we all have to consider as Bears fans.
What? No. I would, despite everything you see and hear about the Bears and the organization, I still think that this, with Caleb Williams, I still think this has to be the most attractive job in all of the NFL. Maybe Jacksonville, if that becomes available because of Trevor Lawrence. But I don't know. I don't know that I would say that Trevor Lawrence is better than Caleb Williams right now. That I'm not saying that would be the quarterback that I would want to work with. But in any event, with that one, it's Stefanski seems very interesting to me. And I was thinking about some of these other guys too. When you mentioned Zach Taylor being fired, which I don't think is going to happen because the Bengals have shown a lot of loyalty to their coaches throughout the years. Marvin Lewis, one of them who just survived forever before they finally got rid of him. And I think it was to bring in Zach Taylor. If there was a shakeup with the Cincinnati Bengals organization, I think Lou Anarumo would be my first choice for defensive coordinator. I would actually go, I would lock that in as quickly as I could. That guy is a good coach. It has not shown itself this season because the Bengals have allowed not only numerous cornerbacks to walk away and defensive backs over the years, they've also been beset by injuries in the secondary. And I think Lou Anarumo has done a pretty good job, and he might end up being the scapegoat. And if he is, I would hop on that in a second.
Well, and that's the question. Like, let's say that in the
we'll probably hire him as head coach, though. But that's
well. And then here in this hypothetical scenario that the Bengals have a head coach opening, because you said the Bears are probably the most attractive job. I think there is a healthy.
Oh God, yeah. Well,
Bengals and Bears, because
fair enough.
Joe Burrow is obviously a sure thing. You know, you've got a top 3 quarterback in the league, but then you have to consider their cap and their roster situation, and then also coaching in the AFC, which is dominated by a lot of great quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, and of course the MVP Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills and everybody else that is in the AFC. So which one would be the better scenario in your mind, Adam? The AFC with the Bengals and everything that holds, or coming to the NFC and having to face one of the toughest divisions in football with the Lions, Packers, and Vikings?
Yeah, but in the NFC, how many elite quarterbacks are in the NFC? One, Jalen Hurts. And then you have good quarterbacks. You have some who could be elite quarterbacks, but I don't think are quite there yet. I don't know. And the division's gonna regress to the mean again once again. Although I always say that about the Vikings. The Vikings are one of those things, like, are they just going to they can't keep doing this forever. Like, of all the teams that seem to go out there and find ways to win games, Kevin O'Connell is like 22-6, 23-6 in like 1-score games.
Right.
That's not an accident. You know, that presents itself because that many games, it becomes a trend. Like, we were wish casting that, hey, Matt Eberflus just had a string of bad luck. When he lost 3 games, he had a 90% chance of winning, only for that to transfer to this season in both Detroit and
that's coaching. That's why it's so important in the NFL, because I'm pretty sure if you flipped all 1-score games in the NFL, I saw this chart of all the different teams and what their records would be. The Bears would be like 8-5 right now if you flipped all the 1-score games. So you can chalk that up with the Vikings and say, well, this is why they're not who they are. But at the same time, like that's the margin of error. We talked about this earlier in the show. You know, the one of my favorite sayings comes from, you know, the ex-head coach for Kansas City, Herm Edwards. He said the difference between a 10-6 team and a 6-10 team is about 5 plays. And so that sometimes can be your smallest margin of error, but that's the difference between good teams and bad teams a lot of the times.
Yeah. And the Bears certainly were not winning those games, especially with that coaching staff, even though, again, I believe that Caleb Williams is going to be the guy that does it. I will continue to support him and buy all his cards. And speaking of which, at Windy City Sports Cards, they specialize in buying and selling all things related to Chicago sports. Whether you are a diehard fan of the Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, or Sky, they have got you covered with an extensive selection of sports memorabilia and collectibles. In addition to their Chicago-focused items, they also offer a vast collection of sports trading cards and memorabilia from your favorite teams and players. When you think of the name Reggie, because somebody put this out there, like, hey, who's a player who is a one-name player? Like, when you say his name, that's who you think of. And I'm like, Reggie. And one of my friends called out like 5 different Reggies, and one of them was like Reggie Theus. So I'm like, okay, slow your roll on that one. Even as somebody who loved UNLV basketball growing up, Reggie Theus did not enter my stream of consciousness. Reggie Lewis is not in that one as well. But when I say Reggie, I'm curious because I could be, maybe I'm dead wrong here. When I say Reggie, who do you think of?
Reggie White.
Reggie White, get out of here.
I do. That's who I think of. What do you mean? You can't tell me what I think of when you don't. You don't think of that.
You also once said that Made was you also said Made was better than Swinger. So I don't know if you're my ex.
Tell me if we're just talking about football and you ask Reggie, I'm thinking Reggie White. If you're asking all-time Reggie, I'm thinking Reggie Miller.
Jesus, no, you're so far off. No, it's Reggie Jackson.
Okay.
There's no debate.
Adam.
There's no debate to that. No, he's timeless. You've told me you've never watched The Naked Gun? Like, stop it. So many different, like he played in New York and LA. He played in the Bay Area. He was in the Naked Gun movies.
Yes, I'm aware.
He had a candy bar.
Yeah.
Missed his clutch player. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, maybe I guess I was wrong. I guess some of the better ones are like Shaq, and then I don't know if Walter counts.
Shaq's like Cher. Shaq might be the most ultimate one-name player.
Yes. As far as athletes go,
LeBron.
Sting would probably be in this category.
OJ. Somebody said in the chat.
What? OJ?
Definitely
OJ. There it is. OJ is the one. Like, oh God, that's such a good one. Oh, I wish I had thought of that. OJ's perfect. What one athlete?
Bo Jackson.
Orenthal. Bo Jackson. That's another one. Hey, Sam, by the way, is there any questions? Is there any questions we need to address? Somebody's got to be mad at us because we still, even though we're trying not to be meatballs, we still are. Cadeau Vision. So why haven't the Bears ever hired a former Chicago Bear player who cares about the team as head coach, vice president, or part of the solution? Why haven't the Bears ever hired? They've never hired a former player to lead their team? Never in their history. I mean, George Halas notwithstanding because he was a player coach and ran the organization. Mike Ditka, the quintessential hiring a former Bear to be your head coach. Sense Dick. Okay. There it is. Sorry.
Well, that's because Dick scared them so much they never went back to it, which is what they need to change. Like, you can't be afraid of tougher personalities. And I know people don't like the buzzwords leader of men and program.
People hate that. Oh,
just ultimately football guys. There's nothing wrong with wanting a football guy to lead your locker room. That's what football players ask for. Even DJ Moore the other day said, it would be great to have an offensive-minded guy come in to be our head coach. He could really take this offense to the next level, but he also needs to be a leader of men. And every time, like Bears fans are already sick of hearing about the leader of men buzzword, but it's a buzzword to you that fans use in a debate about who the coach should be, but it's a phrase that players use because that is the culture that's always been successful in the locker rooms they've been in. So you can either acknowledge that that's what the players are asking for or think that you know better.
Yeah, it's so true because that is I think DJ Moore said it because I say it so much. And, I influenced him, apparently. No, but it is true. Like, that is one of the things that we've missed going back. And John Fox was not this guy. John Fox, God, I want somebody to write a book on why I have to somebody please tell me what the thought process was with John Fox. Because, like, he was dumped by the Broncos. And the Bears have apparently done this multiple times because there was a report that Matt Eberflus was close to being fired by the Indianapolis Colts, which I don't think is the case. Like, he's a good coordinator. I think you can tell by the way the Bears' defensive effort over the last 2 weeks. Like, yeah, maybe we didn't give him enough love as a defensive coordinator, but at the same time, he needed to go because there's some people who just aren't good as the NFL, as the head coach type of situation. But again, like, there's nothing wrong with like a strong personality. Because I remember sitting there one day talking. I don't know if I want to put this guy out on blast, but one of my coworkers who lived in Chicago and was also on The Real World. Him and I were. I'm not saying who it was. I'm not going to say who it was. I won't blow him up. I won't blow up his spot here. But he was like, "What is Matt Ebert? Like, what is he? Like, who is he? Like, what is his deal?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's hard to quantify." And his Hard Knocks was coming out. You're like, he looks cool now. Like, I was impressed by the glow up. I'm like, okay, he looks cool. Like, they revamped his character, kind of like when the WWE back in the day, they had a character named Jinder Mahal, who was just like, the usual like race baiting characters that the WWE would put out there. And then he disappears for half a year or 12 months or whatever it was. And he shows up jacked to the gills, just super jacked. Shot like so like jacked, like but looks like Batista body wise, and you're like, yeah, look at Jinder Mahal, and then at the end of the day, you're like, it's still Jinder Mahal. Like, he wasn't over for a reason, and I think that's what Matt Eberflus was. It's like we tried to repackage him as this heel or cool guy or whatever it was, and it's like he's still Matt Eberflus at the end of the day, and there's nothing you can do to take that away. And I think that when you're looking at your next head coach, you have to look at his persona and like, what is he bringing? What is he bringing as a leader of men, but as an authority figure? Like, who is going to command respect out in that organization? Because the thing that I don't care so much about, like, can you design a play? We can find people that can design plays. We're having trouble finding a guy that gets people to get their S together so that they're not taunting the crowd at the end of the game. They know when to call a timeout when things are not going well, making the right challenges. Right. That play, remember, I made that joke, like, and I don't think people understood it. Like, there was a play, I forget who it was, but like, it was so not a catch. But I'm like, I think Eberflus would have challenged that. Like, it was so bad. Like somebody who makes those decisions. So you can call it a leader of men, but I'm like, it's still, don't dismiss it because that's the most important ingredient to me.
Right. Being a leader isn't just about being direct and holding people accountable. It's also about leading by example, which means that you have to show that you know what you're doing. Yeah. And so I'm sure Matt Eberflus had the attributes of, having respect of his players, but where that dissipated was that they lost trust in that. Did he know what he's doing? Is he going to put us as a team and me as a player in the best position to succeed? Because all of this ends up equaling more money for these players and their careers and their livelihood and what they put on tape down the road. And so it's about reputation. And so, Kyle Shanahan, may not be like Mike Ditka, but he has the respect of his locker room and he's the leader of the San Francisco 49ers organization because they trust in what his plan is and how he executes on a daily basis. So, where people are in the chat are pointing out like, hey, like, I want somebody that's vocal, but I need this person to, be good at their job. Yes, that also falls under the jurisdiction of a leader of men, so,
Yeah.
It's not an exact science. That's the other point, is like people are trying to act like there's this perfect answer to this, and there isn't ultimately, which is why this is the most terrifying offseason since last offseason. So I don't,
it's true. And it's not like necessarily being a meathead either. I know that we always use the Dan Campbell kind of a thing, but like there is part of that. But like Sean McVay isn't necessarily a meathead, although he's actually more jacked than you think he is. He wears when he doesn't size up his sweatshirts, you can tell he's more jacked than he is. Although his locker room, if you've ever been in SoFi Stadium, his locker room smells more like Drakkar than you would want it to. But still, the thing of it is like he comes off as a leader too, not necessarily by being a meathead, but by being smarter than everybody. And there's an element to it to where you're going to follow him because you have trust in his decision-making ability. And if you've ever been on a team like that or been with an organization like that, like when Matt Money Smith, who's now the announcer for the LA Chargers, when he was the host of NFL Fantasy Live, like he really kept this in check. Now, Matt Money Smith weighs like 130 pounds. And I used to work out with him. Like I used to bench a dumbbell that was heavier than him, but he had my respect because how smart he was and the way he kept this in line. And you knew not to cross him. You're like, don't cross Money because he's going to make you look like a fool. And like there are different ways that you can be a leader. And I think that's the most important element when we're looking at these players or we're looking at these coaches, and you're enthralled by how many points the Detroit Lions are putting up against the Buffalo Bills. But what is going to happen when Ben Johnson needs to make a difficult decision because he's shielded by Dan Campbell right now? Is he going to be able to do that? Is he going to be accountable? Is he going to do all that stuff? I don't know. And when they got to find out about during the interview process. So before everybody's like hitching their wagon to this guy because he's, he feels cool or whatever, like you got to understand there's more here that needs to happen than just calling a good play.
Well, and that's the set. Well, even if he nails the audition and the interview process, we're still never going to know until September, which is why, going back to my plea or my agreement for this offseason, is it's got to be a show me thing. If they hire Ben Johnson and whoever they hire, I have to acknowledge, I'm not even going to say I have to acknowledge that they have to prove it. And so we're not going to know that answer, even if they hire Ben Johnson, until we get to September. And even then, as we learned with Matt Nagy, won Coach of the Year, his first year as the head coach, we have to acknowledge this process and let the results speak for themselves instead of us trying to speak before the results. And that's something we all have trouble with as Bears fans, especially myself, because we all hope for the best. We all want what we think is the most positive outcome, but we can remain hopeful, and I will do that, but I'm not going to write checks that the Bears need to cash first here, at least going forward. I'm going to do my best because we're both meatballs, me and you, Adam. And
I'm not making any such promise.
Yes, you don't have to come on my side of this. I'm trying, but it's like I have to speak it because this goes against everything that I am as a person. I'm going to give it a shot to see how it goes and see if I can make it through this whole offseason without completely losing my mind before the season starts.
But it's also, and I guess the biggest issue is that we always give them the benefit of the doubt, because we used to write this column, reasons for optimism, reasons for pessimism. And with every team, you can always go through a situation and be like, you know what, if this happens, I will take the Commanders as an example. Like going through this is like, okay, here's why you should be pessimistic about the Washington Commanders. Like the roster really wasn't that good. Dan Quinn had failed as a head coach. Cliff Kingsbury had failed as a head coach. Jaden Daniels' style of play won't pay off in the NFL because he's going to be injury prone or whatever. Like there's reasons like that. But there were reasons for optimism, like, hey, Dan Quinn has taken a team to the Super Bowl. Jaden Daniels was the Heisman Trophy winner, and he's proven he could play at a high level. Cliff Kingsbury might be an awful head coach, but he's a great player. Like, you can see, like, it's how you perceive these things.
Yep.
And I think for most Bears fans, the default setting on their brain is everything sucks and everything's terrible. And for people like you and me, we always want to believe in the best. Like, why would we put our heart and souls into this if we thought it was going to be terrible? Like, I cannot go out on the golf course. And again, a lot of people feel this way. A lot of people walk onto the golf course and they're like, well, I'm probably going to shoot a 120 today or whatever. And my friend will be like, what are you shooting? And I'm like, even par. And by even par, I mean 90. But like even par. He's like, what's your expectation? I'm like, I expect to shoot par. Like, that's why would I be here if I don't think I'm going to be able to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm going to try to this is what I expect. Like, this is what I think. It's never happened before. But I will continue, and I'll probably go out there at some point this week. I know my golf season doesn't get started until another couple of weeks. It's still not golf season for me yet. But once the fantasy year is over and the Bears playoff hopes are – oh, wait, that part of it's already checked the box. Then I'll go out there. But that is always my expectation. And the next year, whomever they hire, I will give that coach the benefit of the doubt unless it's Cliff Kingsbury. Then I won't even fly out to Chicago next year.
Don't put a qualifier on it.
I will. I absolutely will.
What or not?
They don't like I really want to just talk. I'm like, does the average rank and file NFL fan understand that Cliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley are two different people? They're two separate people. They're not the same guy because he's got a history with Caleb. He's like, he was a consultant for 1 year of his collegiate. Stop it. He wasn't there. By the way, what do you think of this? Mike Vrabel with offensive coordinator Lincoln Riley. This is my new thing. This is what I'm getting at. Because the Batch brothers are leaving USC. It's not. I don't know how much Lincoln Riley wants to put up with all this stuff that's going on at USC.
If Lincoln Riley's going to leave for the NFL, it's to be a head coach, not an
No,
offensive.
Nobody will give him a head coaching job at the NFL.
Well,
that'll never happen.
Then he's not leaving.
Well, then I can dream, can I? Don't take this away from me. Don't hurt my heart. But all right. Well, listen, that's a terrible place to end because now people probably want to roast me for that one. Lincoln Riley, like offensive coordinator. I think it could happen. Associate head coach, offensive coordinator, Chicago Bears under Mike Vrabel.
Well, I trust you for the genius thoughts that you have and the genius that you are.
This is what I would try. Listen, I'll make the phone call. Good. I'll reach out to it. I was actually supposed to have lunch the other day with a prominent USC alumni who's in their network, who is actually a high profile. I can't say what his profession is, but that was exactly what I was going to bring up. Like, what is it going to take for Lincoln Riley to be the offensive coordinator for the Chicago? And he was going to say, he'd want to be a head coach. I'm like, well, I want to be the CEO of the Chicago Bears, but I have to be realistic in what I'm able to do. But that's what I got. But in anyways, it was great seeing you. Hopefully everything, I know it's a tough time for you and all your colleagues over there and a lot of my friends as well. So I feel for you guys, but I'm glad that you came on today. I hope this was a little cathartic for you. Yeah. And keep doing what you're doing, and then we'll be back again soon. And that's all I got. Maybe we'll beat the Lions. Who knows? One more thing. Are we at the point, though? Because I think, we have definitive answers. Like, okay, Thomas Brown's not going to be our head coach. I still want to beat the Lions this week, though. Like, I'm back onto that. I'm not apathetic anymore.
I'm not going to fight against it. If they do that,
I would love to see it. Like, I would love to see us beat the Lions.
If they're going to beat the Lions, it's because Caleb Williams played well. I don't want to beat the Lions because they played like crap and got lucky. Like, if you're going to win, do it.
Make it worth our while.
Actually, it's palatable and something that helps the development of our future, our franchise and quarterback of this organization. So I'm not going to fight against it. And I think these last 3 weeks, you got the Lions on the road, Lions in Chicago. That's their second outdoor game of the season. It's probably going to be cold on Sunday. So different environment that they've been used to for most of the year. Then you've got the Seahawks on a short week, the day after Christmas, having to fly across the country to Chicago. And then you might play the Packers where they might not even be playing their starters. So who knows, Adam? They might win 3 in a row to the end of the year. How does that sound?
I would take it.
I'll take to end it.
I would love it. I would take it. I would take all that stuff. And as long as Caleb is having fun and has a smile back on his face, that's all I can ask for. But listen, you always bring a smile to my face. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, especially everything that's been going down over the course of the day. So we do love you. We do appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. So for Greg, I'm Adam. We'll see you later. Bear down. And Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcast. Brought to you by Circa Sports Illinois.